Donald Trump's 104% tariffs on China and other levies on worst offenders, in effect this mornong. White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt said on Tuesday that the U.S. president believes that China wants to make a deal with the U.S. after confirming 104% levies on some Chinese imports would be in effect from 5 a.m. Donald Trump's trade tariffs on what he calls the worst offenders come into effect at 5 a.m. UK time, with China facing by far the biggest levy. The U.S. will hit Chinese imports with 104% tariffs, marking a significant trade escalation between the world's two largest superpowers. At a briefing on Tuesday, White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt said Donald Trump believes that China wants to make a deal with the U.S., before saying, "It was a mistake for China to retaliate. When America is punched, he punches back harder." After Mr. Trump announced sweeping levies last week, hitting some imported goods from China with 34% tariffs, Beijing officials responded with like-for-like measures. The U.S. president then piled on an extra 50% levy on China, taking the total to 104% unless it withdrew its retaliatory 34% tariff. China's Commerce Ministry said in turn that it would fight to the end, and its foreign ministry accused the U.S. of economic bullying and destabilizing the world's economies. Worst offender tariffs also in effect. Alongside China's 104% tariff, roughly 60 countries, dubbed by the U.S. president as the worst offenders, will also see levies come into effect today. The EU will be hit with 20% tariffs, while countries like Vietnam and Cambodia see a 46% levy and 49% rate respectively. The UK was not included on this list, and instead saw a baseline, worldwide 10% tariff on imported goods in effect from last Saturday. At the weekend, Sir Keir Starmer promised the government was ready to shelter British businesses from the storm. Since the tariffs were announced last Wednesday, global stock markets have plummeted, with 4 days of steep losses for all three of the U.S. major indexes. As trading closed on Tuesday evening, the S&P 500 lost 1.49%, the Nasdaq Composite fell 2.15%, and the Dow Jones Industrial Average dropped 0.84%. According to LSEG data, S&P 500 companies have lost $5.8 trillion in stock market value since last Wednesday, the deepest 4-day loss since the benchmark was created in the 1950s. Trump signs coal orders. Meanwhile, the U.S. president signed for executive orders to boost American coal mining and production. The directives order keeping some coal plants that were set for retirement open, directing the Interior Secretary to acknowledge the end of an Obama-era moratorium that paused coal leasing on federal lands, requiring federal agencies to rescind policies transitioning the U.S. away from coal production, and directing the Department of Energy and other federal agencies to assess how coal energy can meet rising demand from artificial intelligence. At a White House ceremony, Mr. Trump said the orders end his predecessor Joe Biden's war on beautiful clean coal, and miners will be put back to work. Trump's new tariffs against China to rise to 104% on Wednesday, White House confirms. The new tariffs on Chinese imports to the United States will rise to 104% on Wednesday, the White House said on Tuesday, carrying out the latest threat from Donald Trump. U.S. tariffs on Chinese imports are set to reach 104% starting on Wednesday, April 8th, the White House confirmed on Tuesday, as Washington doubles down on planned action after Beijing vowed a fight to the end on levies. U.S. President Donald Trump had vowed a further 50% tariff on goods from China on Monday if Beijing did not retract upcoming retaliation, and the White House confirmed that Trump will proceed with this action. The new taxes will be on top of the 20% tariffs announced as punishment for fentanyl trafficking and the separate 34% tariffs announced last week, taking the overall added duties this year to 104%. China blasted what it called U.S. blackmail and vowed to fight it to the end, a Commerce Ministry spokesperson said. The U.S. president insisted that the ball was in China's court because Beijing wants to make a deal badly, but they don't know how to get it started. We are waiting for their call. It will happen, he wrote on social media on Tuesday. Stock swings. Meanwhile, the U.S. stock market is careening through a second straight day of stunning swings. After roaring to an early jump of 4.1%, which had it on track for its best day in years, the S&P 500 quickly lost all of it within a few hours. It then waffled between modest gains and losses before scratching out a rise of 0.4% in afternoon trading. The Dow Jones Industrial Average was up 300 points, or 0.8%, after giving up most of its earlier surge of 1,460 points, while the Nasdaq Composite was 0.2% higher, as of 1:45 p.m. Eastern Time. Asian shares sank again on Wednesday as the latest set of U.S. tariffs was due to take effect. Japan's Nikkei 225 index initially lost nearly 4%, and markets in South Korea, New Zealand, and Australia also declined. Stocks globally had rallied much more earlier in the day, with indexes up 6% in Tokyo, 2.5% in Paris, and 1.6% in Shanghai. But even after those jumps, analysts had been warning to expect more swings up and down for financial markets, not just in the days ahead, but also the hours. The EU, which Trump has criticized bitterly over its tariff regime, may unveil its response next week to the 20% levies it is facing under Trump. French President Emmanuel Macron called on the defiant U.S. president to reconsider, adding, if the EU was forced to respond, so be it. France and Europe never wanted chaos, he said. The U.S. president has ruled out any pause in his aggressive stance, despite retaliatory action from China and signs of criticism from within his Republican Party.